Welcome to Blackbriar Gaming. The second installment in the How to Build a Legion series for 3rd edition will focus on the enigmatic 15th Legion, the Thousand Suns. The purpose of this series is to give you inspiration for your legions, and is certainly not intended to be exhaustive. I'll discuss the use of the Saturnine Boxed Set, the Legion's rites of war, Legion-specific units, and finish with an example of what a 3,000 point army could look like. But before we get into it, a quick reminder that Blackbriar Gaming Discord and Patreon are now live. Check the video description below for links to both. As always, a huge thank you to my Patreon members. You're the ones making this channel possible. Patreon members get access to these How to Build a Legion series early and to vote on the order in which the legions are covered. If that's something you're interested in, join on up. The Thousand Suns, named by the Emperor himself, a legion of mighty psykers cursed by the hubris of their Primarch. Misunderstood, feared, and spurned by the majority of the Imperium, the Thousand Suns represent a wonderfully tragic tale of suffering and betrayal. Their psychic powers give them a truly unique narrative and gameplay perspective, which I think the 3rd edition of Horus Heresy has represented with meaningful but balanced mechanics. The risk versus reward nature of their army-wide psychic powers lets players achieve powerful effects, but at the cost of some of their forces inevitably succumbing to the horrors of the flesh change. It's a legion dripping with character, and I'm pretty excited to delve into its synergies on the table. To begin the conversation around building a legion, I like to look at the current edition Age of Darkness box set. In this case, Saturnine, and discuss how useful it is for the legion we're discussing. In the case of the 15th Legion, the Saturnine box is a relatively good fit, with a couple of exceptions. Let's look at why. Though most artwork of the 15th Legion has them purging the Emperor's enemies in bespoke armor types covered in runes and Legion iconography, I've just finished painting the first Mark II Thousand Suns Space Marine for my army, and he looks fantastic. Thousand Suns armies naturally want to lean towards infantry and walkers, so from that perspective, the Saturnine box set is a great starting point. And while Saturnine Terminators didn't initially scream Thousand Suns to me, the paint jobs and conversion work that I've seen online, combined with their Saturnine-specific arcana, has me convinced. From a lore perspective, it makes perfect sense too, as an Astartes warrior must have a higher level of psychic attunement than your regular bolter pigs. And you know who loves psychic shenanigans? You better believe it, it's the Thousand Suns. Now, what can we do with the Saturnine box to bring the miniatures more in line with what we want to see in a 15th Legion force? Step 1, get your hands on some conversion bits. The 40k Thousand Suns line is great for this, with the Rubric Marines and Exalted Sorcerers boxes giving you a wealth of kit bashing potential. My favourite conversion of a Thousand Suns Saturnine Praetor that I've seen is done relatively simply with Rubric Marine parts and a cheeky Tomb King's shield. I have no idea where that Kopesh comes from, but if you happen to know, chuck it down in the comments. This piece is converted by Kieran over at 40k.w on Insta, who is utterly inspiring, so go check him out if you're keen. You're going to want to take a Praetor to increase your reaction points, as these are used for many of your psychic reactions, so it may as well be a Saturnine Praetor. 40 Mark II Marines have plenty of uses in a Thousand Suns force, much like the majority of legions. Multiple tactical squads are going to be a must. 15th Legion tactical squads are just kind of better than everyone else's too, or at least more flexible depending on which arcana you give them. You will, however, want to fill out your squads with a few extra bodies, ready to take casualties from the inevitable perils of the warp results you roll after half a dozen manifestation checks throughout the game. A couple of 15 strong tactical squads and a 10-man heavy support squad, which the Thousand Suns also do excellently, will eat up those 40 Marines real quick. That's even before you start using bodies for your Legion unique units, or a bunch of other units you might want to include. If anything, get your hands on some more of these lads if you're keen to keep your army in a consistent armor mark. You'll need them. As I mentioned before, Saturnine Terminators being psychically attuned means I'm all aboard the Saturnine train for my 15th Legion force. I'm also a big fan of decent invulnerable saves for my Thousand Suns units, as you get to make invulnerable saves against arcana perils of the Warp's wounds. So if we're taking Saturnine Terminators, how best to run them? I'll be honest, regular Saturnine Terminators don't particularly blow my mind. They're just a bit uninspiring. Saturnine Terminator Command Squads though, well, this is a unit I can get around. For the narrative, we're obviously going to take the Osirian Arcana from the Forges of Saturn Journal Tactica to lower or remove any pesky overload risk. Yes, the Pavoni or Raptora Arcanas are probably more powerful, but sometimes you just have to enjoy the synergies Games Workshop gives us, even if they fall a bit flat. Modelling these chunky boys is going to be a challenge, as not all of the weapon options are readily available. If you go down the route of standard weapon loadouts, plasma bombards, or twin heavy disintegrators with disruption fists, then you'll be fine. If you want to go down the route of paired disruption fists, war axes, or the concussion hammer, you're either going to need to get the 3D printer up and running, or you're going to need an extra Saturnine Praetor sprue. I recommend you take one of each option within a 3-man command squad, which will let you make a command squad with a selection of weaponry at the cost of only one Praetor sprue, which I've seen going secondhand for around $50 dues, so it's not going to break the bank. Particle shredders are the go-to because coming out of Deep Strike you no longer scatter, so template weapons are now a very viable choice. Your Arcana means you're not overloading on the particle shredders, which is nice, and it also makes the twin heavy disintegrators far safer to use, if you want to use your other 3 Saturnine Terminators for some twin disintegrating action. A unit packing 6 twin heavy disintegrators is going to do some work against elite infantry and even dreadnoughts in a pinch. Speaking of dreadnoughts, a Thousand Suns Saturnine Dreadnought can be an absolute nightmare to deal with. Dreadnoughts can of course take Prosperine Arcanas, and the Pavoni Arcana would be my recommendation. It allows your already toughness 8 Dreadnought to go up to toughness 10 when being shot at with the use of the Stoneform Psychic Reaction. This is absolutely obnoxious to deal with, as weapons usually optimized for taking out Dreadnoughts, such as Melter weapons, are now only wounding your Saturnine Dreadnought on a 6+, which is wild. This psychic reaction lasts until the end of the sub-phase 2, so makes your 8 wound, toughness 10 Dreadnought kind of invincible. When it comes to weapons, the Ophiron weapons are clearly superior, so paying extra for them might be worth it. Alternatively, we've got another use for that 3D printer. The Arachne Quad Accelerator platform doesn't really synergize with anything Thousand Suns are trying to do, but it is an extremely economical way to get a whole lot of Strength 7 shooting at damage too. Does this have a particularly good target in how the game is shaping up? Maybe. I think we'll see plenty of enemy rhinos, and while they're tougher than ever with a front armor of 12, your Quad Accelerator will at least contribute to their destruction and layering status effects onto them. I also think Thousand Suns are one of only a few legions that can really make heavy support squads work in 3rd edition, so being able to give your backline infantry units invulnerable saves might be worthwhile. Remembering, of course, invulnerable saves will be used against any perils of the Warp's Wounds. Certainly not an auto-include, but if you're looking to use the models you've got, then sure, go for it. Overall, the Saturnine Age of Darkness box set is a very solid choice to form the basis of your Thousand Suns army, and is certainly what I'm using myself. When I build an army list at the end of this video, you'll see how I've incorporated some of the Saturnine units into a larger 3000 point force. With the Saturnine box considered, let's discuss the Thousand Suns Rite of War, including their Tactica, Gambit, Advanced Reaction, and additional detachments. These will help define the type of army list we want to design, leaning into the 15th Legion's strengths and lore. The Tactica, the Cult Arcana. Models with this special rule gain a bonus of +1 to their base willpower characteristic and gain the Psyker trait. Look, it's not flashy, it's not complex, but the Thousand Suns Legion Tactica enables your army to fight exactly as Magnus intended. That +1 of willpower, right from the start, means that your psykers will always be better than those of other legions. 15th Legion regular marines, who are of course all now psykers, have a willpower of 8. That means that, when making psychic checks to cast your arcana powers, you're looking at a 72% success rate. I'll take those odds. Yes, it means you'll fail around 1/3 of the time, but these are still basic bolter boys, and the flesh change eventually comes for us all. For anything that isn't a regular Marine, things start looking much better. Don't forget that this bonus still applies to all Thousand Suns Legion specific units and characters. Sekhmet Terminators in particular look pretty decent with a willpower of 9, which is shared by the majority of your command units. We'll get into it a bit later, but keep in mind that characters can have one arcana and join a unit with a separate arcana, which generally stacks benefits and really brings your units up to the next level. Units such as your Librarians and Praetor go up to an impressive willpower of 10, giving you a 92-ish% chance to get your powers off, noting any perils along the way. It's important to note that a higher willpower also lessens the effects of perils of the warp if you do happen to get a warp rupture result, and makes you more resilient to psychic curses. There are multiple benefits, likely more than I've mentioned. All in all, due to the Cult Arcana rule, Thousand Suns can all cast psychic powers and are actually pretty good at doing it. This is a significant improvement over the 2nd edition rules and means that Thousand Suns once again are able to be played in line with their lore. Alright, the Gambit, the Prophetic Duelist. If this Gambit is selected, then immediately after the controlling player has made their focus roll in the focus step, they may choose to replace the result of their focus roll, after modifiers, with this model's willpower characteristic. This is actually pretty great. So many of the Gambits are about getting that focus roll. Let's just recap how focus works. So to start with, you take your combat initiative score, which is essentially your base initiative, modified by whatever weapon you're using. If you're using a power sword, it's just your base initiative, usually of 5 if you're a character in a duel, but if you're swinging a power fist, you're going to have a combat initiative score that's 3 less than your base initiative. A Thunderhammer, 2 less. So let's tuck that into the back of our minds. You then look at a bunch of modifiers. If you're a Cataphracti or Saturnine Armor, that's another -1 to your focus roll due to the heavy subtype. You've taken some wounds maybe, that's another -1 modifier for each wound lost. Certain weapons have rules around positive modifiers, and the light subtype gives you +1. Outside support also comes into it, but requires a sizable unit or a Legion banner to get a decent benefit. On top of this, don't forget that any statuses also takes your initiative to 1 and removes any outside support modifiers. You work out your combat initiative score, all your modifiers, then you roll a dice. That's your focus roll. For certain characters, in certain situations, that might be quite high, but not generally for characters that are going to be decent in duels. Let's say it's a regular Centurion with a power sword, with all of their starting wounds. You've also charged, and you're supported by a 10-strong squad of Marines. You get your combat initiative score of 5, a modifier of +2 for outside support, and you've chosen the Seize the Initiative Gambit, so odds are decent you'll roll at least a 5. Maybe you end up with a total focus of 12. That's pretty good. However, with all that in mind, you're not exactly the most survivable character, and a power sword isn't going to do much against a tooled-up opponent. Let's think about a character that's a bit more beefy, and better at putting out damage. How about that Saturnine Praetor we were discussing before, with a mighty Saturnine Concussion Hammer? You're in a squad of Saturnine Terminators, so you're not getting outside support, and your deep striking unit probably just got charged. This chunky boy is slow, with only a base initiative of 4. Your huge hammer has an initiative modifier of -3, so your combat initiative score is a mighty 1. You roll your single dice, your opponent grabbed the Seize the Initiative as they charged, and you get, let's say, a 4. Still a pretty decent roll, but wait, you're also heavy, so that's another -1 modifier, for a total focus score of 4. Normally, you'd almost be guaranteed to go last, but not with the Prophetic Duelist Gambit. Nope, your big swinging, tough-at-nails Praetor is now likely hitting first, replacing their pathetic focus score with their willpower characteristic of 10. Okay, thanks for coming on that journey with me. I just really wanted to delve into it, as the challenge subphase is new to us all. and it's really quite nuanced. As you can see, this gambit is actually pretty good, and really encourages the Thousand Suns to go with characters in heavier armor with bigger weapons, which is something I can definitely get around. Alright, the advanced reaction let's try that again. Fortress, my goodness, why is Fortress so hard to say? Fortress of the Mind. Alrighty, this reaction gives the reacting unit an additional save test against attacks that target the reacting unit. Now, I'm not going to read through the entire process of how it works, the triggers, the costs, and the target, but essentially you make a willpower check, and the reacting unit gains a 3+ invulnerable save against all wounds inflicted as part of the shooting attack that triggered the reaction. Things to consider. Unlike arcanas, this willpower check will be made against the highest willpower in your unit, often 9 or 10 if you've got a character in the unit, which, if your opponent is targeting it with low AP weaponry and you're going out of your way to protect it, you probably do. I think the failed willpower check version of this rule, which I didn't read out but gives you a 5+ invulnerable save, is actually a bit of fun. And if being taken on your own multi-wound unit, who just gained a 5+ invulnerable save, versus something like an opponent's heavy support squad, can actually do some serious work. Why is that? Because if you fail your willpower check, you actually do a warp rupture, perils of the warp result on yourself and the unit that's shooting at you. Let's say the willpower of your unit is 9 because of that character we mentioned. Well, you've only taken 4 wounds from the warp rupture result. It uses 13 minus your willpower for how many wounds you take. And you likely save one of them on your new 5+ invulnerable save that you've gotten as part of the reaction, even after failing. On the multi-wound unit, you lose a single model. Your opponent's squad, however, if it is made up of only single wound marines, which most shooting units are, and a pitiful willpower of 7, well, they get absolutely decimated. But if you do pass, which odds are decent you will, you get that 3+ invulnerable save against this shooting attack, which is obviously excellent. So who benefits from this advanced reaction the most? Units without invulnerable saves or damage mitigation, of course, and ones you really care about. My top picks are command squads with jump packs or veteran assault squads, as those are excellent units. But their one weakness, a lack of an invulnerable save from shooting, is significant. Similarly, a squad of scimitar jet bikes can do some serious work, but are an expensive investment for a unit with a 3+ armor save and no invulnerable save. This advanced reaction makes these units far more viable and meets all those criteria I discussed above. I am always on the lookout for Legion-specific rules that enhance generic units, and this is a great example. Yes, it's only once, but maybe that's all you need before you crash into Assault or unleash some intense firepower. Additional detachments. I really like the Prosperine convocation. 1, because the name is excellent. 2, because it unlocks what Thousand Suns armies want to be building towards. Focused on the strengths of 3rd Edition Heresy, let's start with the troop slot and its prime advantage. Just to clarify, we have a troop slot, a fast attack slot, an elite slot, and a heavy transport slot in the Prosperine convocation. Alright, why is a prime advantage on a troop slot so good for Thousand Suns? Well, if you design your army neatly and don't have to waste prime slots on logistical benefits, you can take the Combat Veteran's prime trait. Most armies take this trait due to leadership bonus, which, of course, Thousand Suns will still benefit from. But why do we really like it? Well, because you also get +1 to your willpower characteristic. Your basic tactical squads now have a willpower of 9. Excellent stuff. The fast attack slot is a bit of fun, but probably the least exciting within the detachment. It can be used for that slightly more viable scimitar jetbike squad we just talked about, or far more interestingly, bringing some aircraft into your army. Now, I wouldn't recommend this yet, chiefly due to a lack of plastic Legion aircraft, but I have no doubt that over the next 2 years, we're going to see the Fire Raptor, Storm Eagle, and Xiphon all come out in plastic. The first 2, probably in a dual kit. This video is already going to be a long one, so I'm not going to delve into flyers in 3rd edition and the completely redesigned rules. But my gut says they're pretty good, and I can't wait to see them tested on the battlefield. On top of this, I actually quite like a cheeky javelin with double heavy flamers and the Raptora Arcana. It'll die to any decent firepower, but the 4+ shrouding reaction from the Kind Shield definitely gives it a chance. And having access to the Crushing Force psychic power means you're able to take out vehicles in a pinch if needed. But the flamers causing panic across your opponent's armies makes this cheap unit an absolute target priority. The elite slot is when things start getting spicy, whether it's for veteran assault squads that we mentioned before, for psykers, who are now excellent and are actually gross when rending on a 5+ from the XVth Arcana, or for the Sekhmet Terminator Cabal, or Kenetai Occult Cabal, which we'll discuss later, and both of which definitely have a place in your army. Being able to take a Land Raider within the same detachment to deliver either of those Legion-specific units I just mentioned is what really makes this detachment impressive. Land Raiders are going to be a staple of 3rd Edition Heresy, and any detachment that unlocked them should be considered. We're kind of combining 4 detachments into one to create a force that is focused on the Thousand Suns' strengths and the lore of how they fight. We'll definitely be seeing at least one of these detachments in the final list I create. Honestly, maybe 2 might be the better choice. Alright, let's look at the armory. Nothing overly exciting in the armory section of the Thousand Suns. Archaea pattern Force Swords are pretty good, with an extra pip of strength over a power sword and better breaching for only 5 points. I mean, I'd probably pay that if I was going to take a power sword, but as I said previously, I'd much rather have my characters kitted out with heavier melee weapons to best take advantage of the Thousand Suns' rather excellent gambit. Telekind Shift is potentially useful, so let's have a read. Essentially, when the controlling player chooses to make a rush move with a unit made up of models with this special rule, they may also choose to make a willpower check for that unit. If the check is successful, the unit gains the anti-grab subtype and the move through cover special rule until the end of the current movement phase. If it's failed, however, the selected unit may not move during the current movement phase. Now, depending on what the terrain looks like on the tables you play on, this could actually be really useful to get units onto objectives, but with rhinos being so good in this edition, I think I'd just rather stick my objective capturing units in those, and have them get even more movement on top of the protection that they're getting from the vehicles. Once again, depending on what the terrain looks like, the risk of not moving at all is just a bit too much for me. This seems absolutely unnecessary, this downside, and is probably why I'd give this prime advantage a miss. Now for one of the main reasons people want to play Thousand Suns armies, the Prosperine Arcana. I've already briefly mentioned a number of these throughout the video so far, but for completeness sake, I'm going to go through each Arcana and discuss which units I think they would be best suited for. There are 5 Prosperine Arcana. You've got Raptora, Pyre, Pavoni, XVth, and Athenian. Before we get into them, let's look at the unique rules around Prosperine's Arcana. So essentially, it's a psychic discipline which models in that unit can use. Note that while the psychic discipline is granted to every model in that unit, it is not granted to other models that join that unit during deployment or the battle, etc, etc. A unit can only ever be given a 1 Prosperine Arcana and cannot gain any additional ones. Note that some units, such as the Kenetai Occult, there we go, Cabal, may have an Arcana as part of their special rules, so cannot be given an additional one from the list. If a model manifesting a psychic power, psychic weapon, or psychic reaction gained from the Arcanas suffers the effects of Perils of the Warp, do not roll on the Perils of the Warp table. Instead, the unit suffers D3 wounds, which each are AP2 and a damage of 1, ignoring cover saves and damage mitigation rolls. However, you can still take invulnerable saves. If a unit has a Prosperine Arcana and is granted a psychic weapon, only one model in that unit may use that weapon each time that unit is selected to make an attack as part of a shooting attack or a combat, so your entire squad doesn't get to each shoot a Strength 9 psychic weapon off. Slightly disappointing, but makes a lot of sense. So essentially, what this means is that the different perils of the warp rules in here avoids stun statuses, and thank goodness. So the regular perils of the warp table, when you're rolling doubles, is when it triggers. Double 1, double 6 is when you start taking wounds, often more than D3. So the D3 piece is pretty nice, always more really than D3. And if you roll a double 2, a double 3, 4, or 5, you actually just get stunned, which is kind of terrible, because statuses stop you, of course, from doing all kinds of things and scoring objectives. But it does mean you'll need a few extra bodies to soak up the wounds within your units. Now, let's start with the Raptora Arcana. So essentially, you have the Crushing Force Psychic Weapon, which is pretty decent at range 12, 1 shot, strength 9, damage 2, armor bane, and force damage. And you also have the Kind Shield Psychic Reaction, which, a bunch of words, essentially means you get a 4+ shrouded damage mitigation roll against any wounds inflicted. And the duration is that it lasts until the end of the sub-phase. I think this is a really decent arcana that almost any unit could benefit from, but is probably strongest on your characters. The way the Kind Shield Psychic Reaction is worded, the target can be a unit that a character is part of, but that doesn't necessarily share the Raptora trait. Now, if I've got this wrong, and it's not impossible, people, because the rules are pretty meaty, please let me know in the comments. I know you definitely will, but if I ask you nicely to do it, maybe they won't be as mean. But if you are able to have characters handing out this 4+ shrouding all over the place, well, that's fantastic. 3 things to keep in mind. Firstly, if you fail the willpower check, you don't actually use up your reaction point, which is a nice little addition and means this isn't punishing. Secondly, the bigger games are, the less impact your psychic reactions will have. Potentially making sure you balance out your arcanas in a way that won't overly exceed your reaction points is a good idea. Thirdly, a unit, which includes both unit and any characters attached, cannot cast more than 1 psychic power per turn. So having a mix of psychic powers and psychic reactions within the unit that contains characters means you're not wasting potential. Having a potentially very powerful shooting attack with only 1 shot in the form of your Crushing Force Psychic Weapon on your characters is also recommended due to their high ballistic skill. This character doesn't need to be in a shooting focused unit either to get the best advantage of this arcana, as you can shoot at 1 target and then assault another. Top options for characters in this edition that might want to take the Raptora Arcana include your Praetor, a Centurion, a Chaplain, or a Herald. While I do really like Vigilators, and there's a whole scouting recon theme you can go down with your Thousand Suns, as they come base with the Smokescreen's trait, this Arcana would be wasted on them. Do not double up the Raptora Arcana with your Smokescreen units. Next up, let's look at the Pyre Arcana. So it comes with the Inferno Shield Psychic Weapon and the the Inferno Shield Psychic Power and the Burning Grasp Psychic Weapon. Alright, so Inferno Shield. This Psychic Power allows a unit to inflict automatic hits onto a unit that makes melee attacks against them. What do these hits look like? Essentially, any unit that scored any hits against you contains models with this special rule suffers D6 hits with a strength of 4, no AP, and a damage of 1. It's not that exciting, innit? The Burning Grasp Psychic Weapon is a initiative modifier none. It's a melee weapon. You get 1 attack at strength 8, AP 3, damage 2. It does have critical hit 6+, breaching 5+, and armor bane. This arcana, unfortunately, does not really cause me joy. Risking a manifestation check to usually only do a few strength 4 hits with no AP and only in combat feels utterly underwhelming. Burning Grasp looks impressive until you realize it's only a single attack. All in all, I think the Pyre Arcana is a real miss, but luckily it's kind of the only one. I'm not going to go into it further, but if you disagree, please let me know what I'm missing. But I'm going to move on. The Pavoni Arcana. Alrighty, we've got the Stone Form Psychic Reaction and the Blood Boil Psychic Weapon. Stoneform, what does it do? That's what gives us that +2 toughness that we discussed previously. It is a reaction, so you can only do it when being shot at. And then we've got the Blood Boil Psychic Weapon. That is a range 12, one-shot, strength 4, AP 2, damage 2, poisoned 2+, psychic weapon. This arcana is great on pretty much anyone, but as mentioned previously, you only want to have a few arcanas across your force that are based on psychic reactions. The priority for me would be any variant of Dreadnought, taking their toughness up to obnoxious levels and giving your opponent's heavy weapons a real hard time, and next up would probably be regular Marine squads that you want holding objectives. Your opponent doesn't want to have to dedicate low firepower, heavy weapons to these squads. It's simply inefficient, and instead will want to clear them out with small arms fire or artillery, which generally has a strength of 4 to 6. Boosting your toughness up to 6 will greatly diminish the effectiveness of these weapons and make your tactical squads an absolute pain to deal with. Units I'd avoid putting this arcana on include anything with a 2+ save, as AP2 weapons with multiple damage generally come with a higher strength and would ignore an increased toughness. This is not necessarily true for disintegrator and plasma weapons, but as these types of weapons are mostly lackluster anyway, let's not focus our strategy towards combating them. Similarly, I'd avoid putting the Pavoni Arcana, or the Raptora Arcana for that matter, on any units riding in the Land Raiders. They've got enough protection already, and will be an assault once they disembark. Now the Blood Boil Psychic Weapon is a bit of fun. That's the Strength 4, AP 2, Damage 2, Poison 2+ hits, and taking out the odd elite model here or there is nothing to sniff at. You'll use it a few times a game, it'll feel good when you do. Alrighty, Corvidae time. First things first, rending is different in this edition and does not ignore regular armor saves. It just gives you guaranteed wounds on rolls to hit. But if your weapon also happens to have breaching, it activates that as well. In this case, on a 5+ to hit. So right away, we want to be giving this arcana to units that either have high rates of firepower or just pour on wounds, or to units that have breaching weapons. Decent examples include heavy support squads with either autocannons or Volkite culverins, or tactical support squads with plasma guns or Volkite calibers. The issue with these units, while they do put out some seriously potent firepower, is that they're extremely expensive single wound models, without an invulnerable save, which means they're extremely vulnerable to wounds from Perils of the Warp from the Arcana specific rules. High risk, high reward, which I'm actually kind of all about. So I'll be including that autocannon unit, though it's important to understand that rending has no effect against vehicles. A unit that I actually think outperforms the support squads when given the Corvidae Arcana is the Seeker Squad, which I mentioned briefly before. With their Kraken Bolters, you've got the option of Panic 1, Suppressive 2, and the one that synergizes so well with rending, the Breaching 4+. On top of this, Kraken Bolters have Precision 4+, and your Seekers are naturally Ballistic Skill 5. You're going to do a ton of wounds no matter what, and for every 5+ you roll to hit, you're going to be putting automatic AP2 wounds onto whatever model you want. My quick maths tells me we're doing 8 or so precision AP2 wounds from a squad of 10 Seekers. Even Praetors with 4+ invulnerable saves are going to be at some serious risk. Thousand Sun Seekers are the ultimate assassins. Pairing this unit with a Vigilator with the Corvidae Arcana might even be worthwhile for that extra pip of willpower. Maybe then you actually give your Seekers the Pavoni trait to make them more survivable with Stoneform, as you just know they're going to be an absolute priority for your opponent to remove from the table. The other premium Corvidae unit I'd like to quickly mention is the Outrider Squadron. You know what? I didn't actually read through the Corvidae trait, I think, when we got here. So just quickly, you've got the Fated Shots, I got excited, the Fated Shot Psychic Power, and you've got the Paths of Consequence Psychic Power. So Fated Shot is what we've been talking about. It essentially gives you rending 5+ special rule. The Paths of Consequence is used at the start phase and reduces your target's movement as well as causing it to suffer dangerous terrain test. It reduces that movement by 2, and every model has to take a difficult terrain test when moving. Now, back to it, the Outrider Squadron. Give these bikes some twin plasma guns, put them in reserves, and watch them cause absolute havoc in your opponent's backlines. Can recommend. Now, on top of all that, you have the second Corvidae Psychic Power. This time, it's a curse. The Paths of Consequence. Reducing movement and forcing dangerous terrain tests is kinda cute, but when you're able to shut down your opponent's scoring units so easily with statuses, trying to stop them moving onto objectives just seems like you're taking the hard route, especially with transports roaring back into fashion. As expensive models generally have multiple wounds in 3rd edition, failing dangerous terrain tests is also less punishing than it used to be. If you do manage to blow up your opponent's Land Raiders carrying a full unit of Cataphracti Terminator-clad combat monsters and then routinely hit them with -2 to move, you're going to be laughing. But even then, the synergy is a tad awkward, as this power must be used at the start of the turn, so anything still in a transport is safe. Look, having it there as a secondary option on some units you're going to give Corvidae to anyway is just fine. If it comes up, use it. Finally, we have the Athenaean Arcana. Now, I'm actually going to read through it first this time. We have the Emanation of Dread Psychic Weapon and the Clarity Psychic Power. So, the Emanation of Dread essentially is a range 24 weapon, 3 shots, strength 4, damage 1. That's not overly exciting, but it does have panic 1. Next up, the Clarity Psychic Power. It allows the controlling player to remove a tactical status from the unit. Alright, very good. When does it happen? You may manifest this psychic power in the effects subphase of the start phase. So it's happening at the start of your turn, which of course, as we know, with Nuncio Voxes now becoming almost mandatory, is absolutely fantastic. And it's kind of like an extra Nuncio Vox is what we're looking at here. Really good. So this appears at first glance to be the most powerful of the Prosperine Arcana. We've got a psychic power that removes statuses from your units, and not just the unit the focus is part of. We're talking any unit within 18 inches and within line of sight. Removing statuses wins you combats, and it gets you victory points. Removing statuses wins you games, people. Then we've got a psychic weapon that causes Panic 1 at a mighty range of 24 inches. Now, a lot of the panic weapons are, of course, like your flamers, etc., which are quite close in, so causing panic out to 24 inches is quite nice. A reminder for everyone, unless stipulated, psychic weapons don't require willpower checks either. And in this case, the Emanation of the Dread, does not. Both the power and the weapon are excellent, which, as we've seen, is not the case for all of the Arcanas, where the weapons are often just kind of okay. So what kind of units do we want this Arcana on? Well, probably not characters. Combat units or units holding objectives, as we want them to be protecting themselves. Probably not on shooty units either, as they're all busy rending all over the place with their Corvidae trait. No, this is kind of for your support units. Maybe a rapier battery, a cheeky javelin, a small unit of scimitar jet bikes, perhaps a single squad of breaches that holds the center of your backline, removing statuses, having their own protection from the shield wall trait, reaction, and invulnerable saves, of course, from their boarding shields. In fact, I'd probably include this unit in the prime slot within the Prosperine Convocation Detachment to get that extra willpower from the combat veteran's prime advantage, as the Clarity Psychic Power is something you really want to be succeeding. And that's all of the Prosperine Arcanas. More could certainly be said, but this video can only be so long. On top of this, we could dive into the psychic powers available to your librarians, your Prosperine sorcerers, Thousand Sun characters, and various other units across your army. That's really a whole video on its own. We will touch on them briefly later throughout the video as it's appropriate, but otherwise I will leave that adventure up to you. It's time now to get into the Legion specific characters and units, and geez, strap in, there's a few of them. We will start, as we always do, with Magnus, the Red, the Primarch. He is, of course, an absolute powerhouse. I'm sure you're not surprised. Able to access any 2 psychic disciplines, and coming with every one of the Prosperine arcanas. Using him on the table will take skill, finesse, and a great memory of the powers you've actually got available. His sire of the Thousand Suns rule is actually kind of fantastic. Essentially, if 4 or more troops battlefield role slots in the primary detachment of this army are filled with units which have a Prosperine arcana, then all force organization slots with the troops battlefield role in the primary detachment are considered prime slots. Next up, furthermore, until the end of the first battle turn of the battle, that would be what the turn is of, whenever the controlling player of a model with this special rule makes a manifestation check for a unit that only includes models with the Thousand Sun trait, they may roll 3 dice and select any 2 to determine the result. That's all models with the Thousand Sun trait, just quietly. Just kicking off their manifestation checks like there's no tomorrow. I'd of course use these prime slots that we talked about before to spread higher willpower across all of my troop units with the combat veteran trait, and having that peace of mind to use as many Prosperine arcanas as you can in that first turn is also really nice. This is excellent design, no notes, doing Thousand Sun things. Take Magnus if you're that way inclined. But we'll move on. Isaac Araman is entirely decent. He is a bit of a combat monster, with divination in particular giving him the Duelist Edge 2 special rule, on top of his +1 initiative modifier from his Corvidaean Scepter. So he's probably striking first in a challenge. The every strike foreseen gambit within divination means he's then hitting on 2 pluses. Absolutely savage. On the flip side, his Corvidae Arcana and Foresight's Blessing psychic power, which gives precision 5+, means he can do some real work supporting shooting units. Precision Melters feels like something I can get on board. Do be mindful that any unit can still only cast 1 psychic power per turn, so having access to half a dozen gives you options, but not necessarily raw power. I think a lot of Thousand Suns players will give him a go, and I dare say they're right in doing so. Magistus? Yeah, I think so. Amon is an interesting one. Right off the bat, is rather unique in that he has Infiltrate 9, so he's going to start right up in your opponent's face. His Stun 3 Reliquary of Dust is magnificent, but only a 1-use weapon, so is likely intended to shut down and weaken the unit he's about to charge. But there aren't many infiltrating units you actually want to be charging into your opponent's forces. And it's okay, but not spectacular in combat, with his weapon only ever doing a single point of damage for each hit. He does have the Telepathy Psychic Discipline, which forces your opponent's units to fall back and potentially come routed. This is great, it's excellent, but when he's using it, he can't move in the movement phase, so it's unlikely to get into combat, which is kind of where he wants to be. He feels like a character that is pulled in multiple directions, none of which particularly synergize with each other, and none of which he seems to excel at. I'd probably give him a miss unless you're heading down a particular theme or narrative with your force. The Prosperine Sorcerer is fine, but is he better than a Librarian? Yes and no. Having 3 different psychic weapons, one for taking out tanks, one for causing panic, and another for pinning, is actually pretty good. It gives you a decent toolbox character that will always be contributing to the game plan by disrupting your opponent. There's a few reasons I'd rather take a Librarian though. Firstly, because Force Axes, which Librarians can of course take, and they're really, really good. Meanwhile, your Sorcerer is stuck with his mediocre Spire Stave. Now, I don't know if it's a mistake, but Force Axes, unlike their power counterparts, have an AP of 2. So you've got a weapon that only -1 to your initiative, it gives you +2 to your strength modifier, and it has an AP of 2, goes up to 2 damage with a willpower check, which you're making on a Librarian at willpower 10. In my opinion, it's straight up better than a Paragon Blade and is probably one of the better weapons in the game. Give your axe-wielding Librarian the Paragon of Battle prime advantage, and he's straight up a combat monster. Secondly, because while your Sorcerer gets a bunch of weapons, he doesn't get any powers, and can of course only use a single shooting psychic weapon per turn anyway. I'd probably just take the telekinesis power and get access to 3+ shrouding, along with the psychic weapon with pinning, or divination to get bonuses to focus rolls and hit on 2+ in challenges, to just really lean into the combat aspect of your Librarian. Arguably, the Sorcerer and the Librarian serve different purposes. The Sorcerer focused on denying enemy victory points, freedom of action, and taking out 3+ save bolter pigs in combat, whereas the Librarian apparently is just an absolute combat monster that can also support your forces or disrupt your opponent. If you've got the points and you're inclined to, you wouldn't go wrong with just taking both. Though I dare say there's slightly more interesting command choices that also get low-key psychic powers in the form of your Prosperine arcanas. So maybe the best choice, after all of this analysis, is actually to take neither the Sorcerer or the Librarian. What a journey. Alright, let's move on. Onto something a little more spicy. The Sekhmet Terminator Cabal. What have we got here? Alright, the good, they are weapon skill 5, they've got 3 attacks, plenty of weapon options, they've got a Vanguard 3. Great stuff. The bad, they're cataphract armor, so you're going to need to put them in a transport. They're also expensive at 45 points each, and they're kind of just boring. Taking away their ability to take a psychic discipline is really disappointing, and it's the only thing which gave them any real flavour. So what are you getting for 15 points over a vanilla Cataphracti Terminator? You're getting a higher weapon skill, an extra attack, higher leadership, cool, and willpower. I mean, it's not terrible, I guess, especially when that higher willpower is so important to get our arcanas off. I think that if you're planning on taking some Land Raiders in your force, then these guys are a no-brainer. And if you're taking a 1 Land Raider, you probably want to be taking 2 or 3. So it's a whole force design commitment at that stage. Do I think that's what Thousand Suns want to be doing? Not really. Your infantry are just so much more interesting. And there's other ways to get across the board the mass armor 14. But not for the Sekhmet Terminator Cabal. Be warned. Let's stick with the Cabal theme for now and look at the Knetai Occult. I'm really struggling with that word. Knetai Occult Cabal. There we go, that sounded good. These guys are absolutely fine. They will mince through regular Marines with their AP3 swords and 4 attacks, but will struggle against your opponent's dedicated assault units unless you're the one being charged, due to only getting an invulnerable save from their psychic reaction. Gaining precision in combat is kind of fun, but with AP3, you're only going to be doing so much damage to anything you want to single out, noting of course they do have the breaching. Perhaps it's good for taking out special weapons within mid-range assault units like assault squads and whatnot. They're not going to break the bank at 24 points, and they can jump out of a Rhino and still assault, so I think they're worth including to countercharge your opponent's line units that inevitably push into the midfield. But now that I think about it, they don't have Vanguard, so it's a bit of a waste to use them in this way. Take them for flavour, and just make sure you pick your fights. The Legacies document brings us 2 more Cabals, which we'll stick with for now. First up, we have the Numerologist Cabal. This is such an unhinged unit. You can end up with a Psychic Tech Marine, your Numerologist, carrying a Thunderhammer and Graviton Gun, supported by Marines, your Life Wards, carrying an assortment of Power Fists and Rotor Cannons. It's kind of all over the place. Then you get access to 2 excellent psychic powers. You get Foresight's Blessing and Mind Burst. Outside of a command unit, for what is really a bargain. You're fixing up vehicles and automata at the same time, and just getting all this on top of it. Oh, and of course you can't be sniped out of your unit, because the Life Wards feel the urge to jump in front of bullets for your psychic powers casting, a vehicle fixing, Graviton gun wielding powerhouse. Now besides this Graviton gun, to hand out some cheeky pinning, I'd actually keep the unit nice and cheap. The life wards are there to sacrifice themselves, and you don't want your numerologist in combat. But with all of that in mind, I think this guy is kind of excellent. His intelligence is a bit low for repairing things, but you can take a cyber familiar to help with that. His willpower also isn't anything impressive, but you're getting a lot for your points, so you're kind of okay with it. If you're going to take any Thousand Suns automata or a decent number of vehicles that just aren't rhinos, I would seriously consider this unit. Also, it's going to look really cool. Your other Legacies unit, the Amitara Occult Intercession Cabal, is equally interesting. We've got Psychic Assassins. Surely that's enough. But I guess we'll look at their rules. Alright, for only 5 points more than Recon Marines with Nemesis Bolters, you get better ballistic skill, you get 2 wounds, you get the XVth Arcana for free, which is exactly what you want to be taking on this unit, and you get a better cool value. Yes, you only have the 4+ armor save, but hunker down in some cover on the other side of the board, use your smokescreen straight to shroud when needed, and most weapons will actually have a hard time taking your Psychic Assassins out. Yes, Nemesis Bolters aren't as broken as they used to be, but with rending from your XVth Arcana, they can do some serious work. 2 units of 5 to pick off special weapons, pin units, and remove Nuncio boxes sounds like a decent investment to me. But we are not done there, no. The Thousand Suns are spoiled for choice when it comes to Legion-specific units. Next up, we have the Castellax Archaea Automata. Essentially Castellax that have some funky weapons and soak up wounds from your perils of the warp. But you can only take them as a single model. Units of 1. While putting wounds onto an 80-point model with only 4 wounds may sound like something ridiculous to do, don't forget we have our Numerologist Cabal, who can then heal our Castellax back up. Now, the first time your opponent sees this occur, they're probably going to put an end to it pretty quick and work out what you're up to, but it's at least a fun interaction. I don't think the Castellax are an overly powerful choice, but if you're looking to spend $128 dues on a 4-wound model that does, in its defense, look excellent, then go nuts. Finally, we have the Contemptor Siren Dreadnought. I actually quite like this guy. Besides having the sickest looking Dreadnought model in the entire Heresy range, and yes, you can fight me on that, he's also pretty decent. Going up to 6 attacks when outnumbered with his Gravis Force Blade and potentially doing 4 damage with each hit is very, very decent. It means he's a great counter to Saturnine Terminators. But the exciting part is being able to take a Psychic Discipline. Biomancy is an excellent choice and lets your Dreadnought then rip into enemy vehicles in combat at strength 11, doing damage 4 for each hit if you pass your willpower check. Twice. It also makes him toughness 9, giving you a serious edge in combat against, well, everything. Telekinesis is another great choice for reasons we've already discussed, but in the end, the model is excellent, he does some cool things, we probably want to put him in a list. Finally, we have the army list. Now, the Thousand Suns can go in so many directions and are an army for the player that loves to tinker with army lists. The list I'm about to discuss is just one example. There are so many other ways you go to do a Thousand Suns army, and so many of them are good. I will be presenting a 3,000 point army list today, as I believe this will be the most common points level battles are fought at in Heresy 3rd edition. This army is a balanced list, half flavor, half power. When building my armies, I design them with effects in mind. Now in Horus Heresy, I design around 7 different effects, defined by a mix of capabilities and common threats. I have broken them into priority and secondary effects. My priority effects are hold objectives, clear enemy units from objectives, destroy or cripple heavy transports. My secondary effects are defeat enemy characters, efficiently destroy light and medium vehicles, degrade enemy long-range fire, and destroy or disable dreadnoughts. There's plenty of different ways to achieve these effects, but each army we build must be able to do them all to some extent, focusing on redundancy for those priority effects. Considering all of that, Here is the list. Alright, we're starting off with a Crusade primary detachment, as you will. In the high command slot, I've got a Praetor with a Saturnine Terminator armor. I've given him the Raptora Arcana, the War Axe and Disruption Fist combo, and a Saturnine Teleportation Transponder. Now, is this the most powerful option for 60 points? Is this what you want to be doing? I just think it's a bit of fun, so I decided to do it with this list in particular, because I think the Thousand Suns do Praetors and Saturnine armor better than anyone else. In my command slots, I've got a Librarian with the Paragon of Battle Prime Advantage that we talked about, and of course, a Force Axe. I've given him the Divination Psychic Discipline so that this guy in particular can be just an absolute combat powerhouse. I think he will give almost any combat-focused special character a run for their money in challenges, noting that you've got your wonderful Thousand Suns Gambit as well. We then have a Centurion in Terminator armor for 120 points. We've got the Raptora Arcana, Tartarus Terminator, of course, so that we don't slow ourselves down, and a cheeky Power Fist. The Centurion is really just there to open up detachments. Then in our troop slots for this detachment, we've got 2 tactical squads, both with 12 Marines in it. I wanted just those extra bodies to soak up the wounds from the inevitable failed manifestation check. We're going for the Raptora Arcana in both of them for a bit of protection, but you could very well give them Pavoni if you were that way inclined. I've given the logistical benefit to one, and they both have Nuncio Voxes. Alright, transports. Whole bunch of rhinos. So I've got 4 rhinos here. I've given them all pintle mounted Havoc launchers. I think that is just the best option. You could, of course, go in other directions for flavor and give them different kind of weapons, but being able to just throw stun and statuses out across your army once these rhinos have done what they needed to be doing is just so fantastic. And it means your opponent has to deal with these rhinos. And at armor 12 and 5 hull points, they're just not that easy to kill anymore. Right, the logistical benefit has been used to buy a Contemptor Osiren Dreadnought. That last Legion-specific unit that I talked about there, I think it's a lot of fun. I've given it Telekinesis, the Psychic Discipline. I've given it the Gravis Force Blade and just kept it with a Gravis Bolt Cannon to keep it nice and cheap. We've then got a Combat Retinue detachment that the Praetor is opening up for us. And in this detachment, I've got 3 times Saturnine Terminator Command Squad. That is 3 Terminators in the unit. I've given them the Pavoni Arcana, so their toughness can go up to ridiculous levels. As I discussed on how I would convert this unit, I've given 1 the paired Disruption Fists, 1 a War Axe, and 1 a Concussion Hammer, just so we can use that Praetor sprue nice and easily to create this unit and not have to worry about getting into 3D printers, because mine's broken right now, but that's a next year problem. I've also given them 3 Particle Shredders, because that's what this unit wants to do. It wants to deep strike down, Particle Shredder something that's holding an objective, and just absolutely wipe it off the board. Right, the next attachment we have being opened up by the Librarian is the Prosperine Convocation. I did say I was going to take one, and I have. Here in the troop slot, we've got a 12-strong tactical squad, again with the Athenaean Arcana, and unfortunately has to go with the logistical benefits again. I wanted to include just different kinds of units, and there's just not that many detachments that you can open up, so here we are. Disappointing, but it is what it is. So just another tactical squad in there for 3 tactical squads across the army. Is that enough? Probably not. 4 line units is probably where you want to be at 3,000 points, but it also just gets a little bit boring. So I've got 3 in here, but keep that in mind for your own lists. We've then got a Scimitar Jetbike Squadron. I've got 6 of them, all with multi-melters. Melters. As I discussed, I think these get a lot better in Thousand Suns Army, where you're able to take that advanced reaction for a 3+ invulnerable save, just to save your Jetbike Squadron from that one really brutal round of shooting that your opponent probably wants to take them out with before you get to get on in there with your multi-melters and start causing some real damage. I've then, in the elite slot of the Prosperine Convocation, got a 10-strong Seeker squad with the XVth Arcana, of course, a cheeky Nuncio Vox. I think this squad is just absolutely fantastic. It's going to do terrible things to your opponent. They're going to want to destroy it very, very quickly. It might be worthwhile thinking about getting a Vigilator into your army and giving that Vigilator something like the Pavoni or, the Pavoni trait to be able to help protect this unit. Pavoni Arcana, I should say. So just think about that. I haven't done that in this list, but it was something I was considering. Then from the logistical benefits, I've taken 10 times Kenetai Occult Cabal. Are these guys fantastic? No, I don't think so, but I really wanted to include some more Thousand Suns units in this army just to bring in some character, some narrative, some fluff, and these seem like a decent way to do it. I think putting them in one of the rhinos that we've got up above and just sending them into the midfield to deal with your opponent's Despoiler and Tactical and Breacher squads, I think is definitely worthwhile, and they get the job done. Is an Assault squad better? Maybe. Is it as fun or look as cool? No. Next attachment, we have the Shock Assault attachment. This is the first attachment being opened up by our Centurion. It is heavy assault units, and in here I've just got a 5-strong Tartarus Terminator squad. I've given these guys the Pavoni Arcana to boost their toughness when needed, and at the same time, although probably Raptora might be the better way to go. I think I specifically said not to give your Terminator squads the Pavoni Arcana. Raptora is probably the better choice, but what I've given this squad is some Chain Fists. So 3 Chain Fists, 2 Power Fists. We're going to see a lot of Land Raiders in this edition. We're going to see them charging up into the middle of the battlefield, and having these Tartarus Terminators able to just on foot run up the board and just jump on one of these Land Raiders and tear it apart with their Chain Fists, I think it's going to be absolutely fantastic. Going up to 5 Chain Fists might be the right amount. I haven't crunched the numbers on whether 3 Chain Fists is enough. You can let me know in the comments how many Chain Fists it takes to tear through a Land Raider reliably, statistically, in one assault phase. But that's what this is here for, a bit of a countercharge on your opponent's heavy vehicles. Now, the last attachment we've got is a tactical support detachment. In here, I decided to include 3 rapier batteries. I'm a huge fan of rapier batteries of all descriptions. We've given these ones laser destroyers specifically because I did note that in this army, I was really lacking some anti-heavy tank firepower, and this is just a really good way to clean that up. And lastly, for the army, I've got a heavy support squad with autocannons. I think with the XVth Arcana, these are just abusively good. Autocannons, I think, are great in this edition as they are. Rending on a 5+ to hit and getting that breaching off means that not only are these good against kind of light, medium vehicles, but they are so good against your opponent's Terminators. Doing 2 damage, so when you roll to hit, you roll a 5+, you're automatically then wounding at AP2 with 2 damage. It's just insane. So these are going to really tear apart some of your opponent's elite units, and they're going to do it at quite the distance. So that is, on the nose, 3,000 points. And that is all I wanted to say about that. The Thousand Suns are an army with so much depth. There's plenty more synergies and strategies that I didn't touch on here, but I think we've gone well over my usual time for this series. You can go whatever direction you like with the 15th Legion, but I think a balanced force is best, taking advantage of what the Prosperine Arcanas and Psychic Disciplines can offer you. Let me know in the comments if I've missed any top tier options for the Thousand Suns. There's so many that I'm sure I have. Thank you so much for watching, and importantly, make sure to keep rolling those dice and getting hyped for heresy.